This is the Monday, May 9th, 2022 special meeting. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez, not yet present. Councilmember Friedman? Here. Councilmember Snedden?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon, not present. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Present.
Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
And Mayor Rouse?
Here. And we have an item to read.
Item 1, fiscal year 2023, recommended operating and capital budget.
All right, very good. Director Zachary.
Mayor Rouse, members of the City Council, Jill Zachary, Parks and Recreation Director. With me today, I have Tina Nelson, our Business Manager, Jasmine LeBlanc, the Assistant Parks and Recreation Director, Simone Herrera, who is our Parks Manager, and Rich Hanna, our Recreation Manager, and Cameron Benson, Creeks Manager, will also be joining us. With our presentation, we will be providing an overview of our proposed budget for fiscal year 23. And just as a way of introduction, we are reintroducing a number of programs and services that we've been unable to provide as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. We've looked at a number of different ways to return to more normal operations, both in terms of programs and services, but also the revenues that come to the department to provide those services and those programs. We've also considered our facility maintenance needs, increased costs, and how to really provide a robust program going into fiscal year 23. So with today's presentation, we'll provide a department overview, review some of our program highlights by division, and then review each budget by fund, first the general fund, then the Creeks Fund and the Gulf Fund, briefly go over our capital projects, reserves, and then have opportunity to answer your questions, public comment, and discussion. We also have the chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission, Kathy McGill, here to make remarks, and I believe Commissioner Longstreet may also be joining via Zoom. So to begin, the Parks and Recreation Department has 19 programs. We have 4 funds and just under 91 full-time equivalent staff. We also budget for 110,000 hourly hours that help us implement our programs and services. We have 5 managers and an assistant director. When we look at our personnel by division, the breakdown shows you Creeks at just under 9, the administration division essentially being the smallest. Golf is the amount of staff time that we spend overseeing our contract with the Corsco company, recreation, and then parks. Our hourly personnel by division give you a sense of really where those staff hours go, largely in our recreation division, our after-school programs, our summer camps, our facility monitors, all of the things that we do to support recreation programs and services, with smaller amounts in parks and a very few in the administration division. Also in parks, as we will review further on in the presentation, is the staffing that are assigned to provide services in city streets, street trees, parkways, and medians, as well as contracted services for the waterfront department and public works, water resources. Overall, looking at our revenues for the department with all 3 funds, we're projecting just over $16 million in revenues for the next year, with just under $5 million, 4.7 in TOT for the Creeks Fund. Rents and camps, facilities and permits, and golf is rolled into the large amount of $9 million. And then other miscellaneous, including the utility users tax that comes for the department's maintenance of street-related infrastructure. When we look at our expenses going into the fiscal year 23, just under $30 million. Again, this is all 3 funds. When in observing sort of salaries and benefits, those are for the departmental staff. Allocated costs are for all the allocated costs that we have throughout the department, facilities, IT, insurance, all of those different aspects. Supplies and services is rather large. That is where the contract is with the Course Co. for golf course operations, and you'll have a more specific presentation related to that. And then special projects and capital outlays. The capital outlays number is larger because that's the funds that leave the Creeks Fund that go from operating into capital. That's why you see a large number there. So for the general fund, just to go over some of our highlights, we're going to start with forestry. We managed just over 30,000 trees, park trees, street trees, open space trees. In fact, there's probably another 50,000 that we can't count because we don't know how many trees there are in Schofield Park or Rattlesnake Canyon. We service annually 5,400 trees. Of those, about 80% of those trees are street trees. We do street pruning, we do tree removals, restorative work, and more recently we've been able to restart our replanting efforts, which has been really important to do since they were slowed down, and first because of the drought and second because of the pandemic. Some of the key activities and highlights for the new year is continuing to implement revisions to our street tree master plan, focusing on species that are less likely to create infrastructure conflicts over time, as well as to continue to include the increased diversity in our street tree population. One of the things that the forestry folks do as well is we enforce the street tree and front yard setback tree ordinances. Park operations. Parks is pretty diverse with over 1,800 acres of parkland, playgrounds, sports fields, volleyball courts. We also are very much involved with maintenance of 35 miles of trails and the front country trails, working with county parks and the Forest Service. We coordinate the city's IPM program, citywide program, and then we also do very specific projects that our staff undertake, including park turf renovations. More recently, we've been focusing on Ambassador Park, La Mesa Park, and then as part of the renovation of Bonnet Park, focused on some enhanced turf there. Some ideas and considerations we had during COVID is how do we modify our work schedules? How do we make sure we're trying to keep our parks as safe as possible? Although we're coming out of the pandemic, we did want to note that going into it and throughout the pandemic, we modified our staff work schedules so that we had more staff over the weekends than we usually do in order to make sure we were servicing everything and keeping the public safe. Parks highlights, we also maintain our beaches, about 3 miles of beach in the waterfront area, raking, grooming, and grading them to support the use of those beaches and to improve safety. In order to do this, under the Coastal Commission permit, we monitor our beaches for endangered species like the snowy plover and make sure that any activity that we do on the beach does not interfere or endanger species. As I mentioned earlier, the Parks Division also maintains medians and parkways for the city. Not all of them, luckily, but the ones that are designated as the ones the city maintains. We have 93 locations and 5,500 square feet across the city. We work with a contractor to do a good deal of that work, but we also have some staff that are assigned to that. We maintain the natural open space, that's the Sheffield Reservoir, on behalf of the Public Works Water Resources. And then we also do the vegetation fuel reduction management annually in our open space parks. Some of the priority projects going into fiscal year 23 for us include implementing turf renewal and irrigation controller repairs in 11 city parks. We will be using the ARPA funds that council approved to do very much needed upgrades. We have irrigation systems that are in excess of 30 years old in many of our park areas. And they are largely band-aided together, so hopefully we'll be able to do quite a bit of improvements there. We're also spending more time, particularly considering we're now back in drought conditions, assessing irrigation use in our parks to make sure we're making use of water most efficiently and effectively. As I mentioned also, street and park tree planting is a high priority going into 23, as well as deferred maintenance. Over the years, our street tree population has continued to age, and we have not been able to keep up with maintenance, so we're continuing to find ways to increase that maintenance. Other activities that are important for the long-term health of our park system is updating our park work order and safety inspection systems. Now that we're exiting from the COVID pandemic, we're back in the place where we have the staffing to take this on. It's really make sure we're staying on top of all of the work order and safety issues that we have. And then, as we do every year, we have any number of park safety improvement projects that become priorities as the year goes on. In recreation, recreation was a tremendous time during COVID. In the last summer, just as an example, we served almost 5,600 youth in our camps. We had 300 sessions. We had over 7,000 hours of camp offered. This is the second summer that we operated during pandemic conditions and really filled a void that had exposed itself as a result when many other programs shut down and did not start up. We awarded 125 scholarships as well. In our after-school programs, we were able to restart those, and so we served over 2,000 in the last year, and we're hoping to expand that further back in the next year. Some of the things that I know our council is very familiar with, pickleball has experienced a boon thanks to the pandemic, and so our pickleball pass holders grew from 336 to 950, as well as our swim pass holders. Swimming, pickleball, tennis, golf, those were great ways for people to be outdoors safely during the pandemic, and we don't see those activities abating. We could see it continuing even in new conditions. We also were very much able, even though our facilities were closed down, to continue our food distribution programs. Some of the things that make recreation what it is we have wonderful facilities, and we have the ability to serve people in the community in a wide range of venues, whether it's our indoor rental facilities, our outdoor wedding, private gathering locations, our picnic sites, and generally we can say we have about 12,000 every year. Similarly, as the department that hosts the special event permitting process, working collaboratively with other departments, we can process as many as 140 events in any year, and we see that continuing to tick up as we exit from the pandemic conditions. We don't do this all by ourselves. As I showed in a previous slide, with just under 26 full-time equivalent staff, we rely heavily on independent contractors to provide programs and services, as well as the co-sponsorships we have with 14 different organizations in the community. And those independent contractors, when you see our revenue and expense budget and our special supplies and expenses, that's where they get paid through, and the revenue comes in, and then we pay those independent contractors for their work. Very near and dear to our hearts are free programs, and we have a number of them that serve members of the community who are unable to participate in summer camps that cost beyond their financial means. Through our summer fun program, the recreation swim program we have at Ortega Park Pool, food distribution, youth apprentice, Arts Alliance, and then the emerging new one we have this year, the Summer Nights program. We very much strive to offer as many scholarship opportunities as possible. So our goal going into fiscal year 23 is 65 after-school, recreation after-school scholarships, which would be valued at $50,000. 154 Campership Alliance scholarships, $53,000, and 350 youth swim lessons at $4,000. I would add that not all of these are covered through the general fund when we have our contract agreements. Part of those agreements require the contractor to provide those scholarships, and where possible, we refund them. We also work closely with the Park Foundation that collects funds and the Audacious Foundation that provides for scholarships, particularly for the youth swim lessons. Program changes post-COVID. As I mentioned earlier, we want to return to some of the programs we were unable to provide, including providing free after-school youth sports, increase our ability to support sports leagues, support field reservations and facility rentals. Indoor sports are starting to come back, volleyball and basketball leagues, and then also community special events that people really enjoy that the city does fund through the general fund, including the Children's Fiesta Parade and the Concert in the Park series. We'll have 4 concerts this summer in the month of July. Our priority projects for the Recreation Division include expanding our Youth Apprentice program, launching the Summer Nights program, thanks to the leadership from our Councilmember Eric Friedman, Oscar Gutierrez, and Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez. Free after-school sports, as I mentioned, to serve 850 children. Our recreation after-school program, rebuilding that and finding a way to make it very sustained. We were challenged last year because of the inability to staff, and so we're hopeful moving into the new year with the changing to our hourly staff rates, we'll be able to really rebuild that. It's a critical program for families looking for something for their children to do after school while they're still at work. Parents really need programs like this. And then also reopening our community centers so that we're able to really continue and advance the diverse recreation social service programs we once provided. The administration division, our highlights, our role is really to oversee department administration, park facility renewal and reinvestment, policy issues related to park safety and park rules. We also manage our concession agreements, contracts, and the professional services agreements. We look for the opportunities to secure outside grants and other funds, and then also staff Parks and Recreation Commission, lead the public outreach and marketing initiatives for the department. Our priority projects going into '23 include developing a public art policy, increasingly as there's more and more interest in having art in city parks as well as other public spaces. The city is very much in need of developing a public art policy, and we look forward to being able to bring something like that to council at some point in the next fiscal year. We've relied many, many, many years on a joint use agreement with the Santa Barbara Unified School District. It has been out of date, expired for about 4 years, and really want to use this opportunity in the next fiscal year to reestablish that. Our ability to share facilities and resources is critical for the families and the youth in our community. We're focusing on our park assets, really taking the time to inventory what we have and come up with a long-range 10, 20-year plan for reinvestment. Open space management has also been a bit on the back burner as a result of the pandemic. We have a number of critical open spaces where we have pending management plans we'd like to pick up in advance. And then we have a number of important projects that are underway that we hope to actually construct and complete in the next year, including the renovation of Eastside Neighborhood Park, the band shell at Plaza Del Mar, Carrillo Gym, and the Louise Lowry Davis Center. So very quickly, looking at our general fund expenditures, our proposed expenditures for fiscal year '23 are just over $21 million. That is an increase over what our original budget would have been for '23. And the adjustments column gives a sense of where that lies. To a large extent, the increase in expenditures is associated with the return to services largely in our recreation programs, and then other costs associated as the city's budget adjusts over time. When we look at our expenses by program for the Parks Division, Parks Division expense budget is just over $9 million, and it breaks down into beach maintenance, medians and parkways, forestry, and park operations. And within park operations, we have the services that we provide to the waterfront department. In medians and parkways, we also have the services we provide to Public Works for the Sheffield open space, and then forestry is street trees and park trees. In recreation, we have an expense budget of just over $10 million, and the breakdown on this slide gives council a sense of our largest programs, specifically facilities and special events. So all of our beachfront facilities, other facilities that we rent, the special events program, the revenue that we received from the restaurant at the Cabrillo Pavilion, those types of activities. And then aquatics is a large program, Los Baños, Oak Park Wading Pool, Ortega Pool, youth activities. Active adults is largely focused around Carrillo Recreation, and then sports is both youth and adult sports. When we look at our revenues, the increase in revenues largely fall from our original budget in '23 to our recommended budget in '24 in camps, facility fees, and permits. And again, that is the return to normal. That is the revenue that would come in from our summer camps, so revenue that comes in for our contractors for their camps that then goes out, as shown in the prior slide, through expenses. We have small increases in utility users tax revenue, and then a slight decrease in our rents revenue, and that's really from our community centers, the West Side, Franklin Community Center, and the Davis Center, which is currently still closed because of the renovations. shows a overall revenue budget for the general fund of $7.6 million. By program in the Parks Division, this breaks down essentially where those funds come from. In forestry, that's utility users tax revenue for street tree maintenance. Medians and parkways supports a portion of the median and parkway program. Grounds and facilities maintenance, again, a portion of that is for waterfront. And then we provide park ranger services to the school district, so that includes doing premise checks of the schools on weekends and after hours. It's 1.5, just under 1.6 million in revenue. In recreation, just under 6 million revenue that's proposed for fiscal year 23, with the largest amount coming in facilities and special events, followed by aquatics, youth activities, community services, and sports, active adults. Again, it speaks to the programs and services that we're starting back up. It also speaks to the costs, to meet those costs of providing those services. For fiscal year 23, the department has 3 position changes. The first one is to combine 2 vacant .8 full-time equivalent staff, which is 1.6 FTE. We have a vacant pool technician position and a vacant head pool lifeguard position. We'd actually like to create a 1.0 FTE aquatic specialist that would do both of those positions and give the department more flexibility in staffing throughout the year. This does mean it reduces our overall full-time equivalents for the department by 0.6. We have a vacant administrative specialist position in community services that we're proposing to reclassify to a recreation specialist that would allow that position to further support our youth apprentice, Arts Alliance, community service-related programs. And then lastly, a recommendation and a request to reclassify our lead park ranger to supervising park ranger. We finally filled our 4th park ranger position early in this calendar year. Our park rangers, we have 4, are critical to safety in our park system. Many of them work on the weekend and after hours, and specifically on the weekend, we also have hourly weekend staff that support the park rangers when we have issues that need to be addressed in our parks. Having a supervising park ranger would allow that position to also oversee the weekend park staff. General fund fees and charges, we have 186 recreation program and facility fees. Every year we look at cost recovery, we look at maximizing participation, competition in the market, the community benefit that our programs and services provide, our target markets, and flexibility. With those considerations going into the new fiscal year and increasing cost really to provide programs and service being a real driver, we have some proposed moderate increases and or decreases for 89 of our fees. As an example, our youth activities program, our skate camp, we have higher operating costs. So the proposed is an 8% increase, for example, from $185 to $199 per session. In aquatics, pool passes, an increase from $51 to $56 per month, essentially the increased cost of water, as well as the increased cost of chemicals, which we've experienced in the last couple of years and will experience more next year. In active adults, we have increases for our ballroom dance. The last increase was a couple of years ago. And then similarly, indoor facility rentals, some of the things we're trying to do and have successfully done and want to continue is bundling our fees so that we're including furniture, event monitor, setup, takedown, and proposing a 6% increase there. Part of that has to do with the increased cost of the staff, the hourly staff as well. Field rentals, turf renovation is critical to our ability to rent our fields, and the cost to renovate turf is not low, so proposing to increase it from $16 to $20 per hour, still exceedingly affordable compared to other locations within the city. And then with pickleball permit fees, working our way toward increasing cost recovery in pickleball and tennis, which helps offset our court maintenance and our staff time. Our budget reductions related to the 1% is focused primarily on a vacant recreation manager position. We've had a vacancy in that position for a couple of years, mostly because the Cabrillo Pavilion was closed, and we were trying to save money since the revenue was down. We actually have in mind for how we would fill that position, but can keep it vacant for at least 6 months in the fiscal year before we have a plan that we can present to the city administrator. And then in capital, as part of every 5-year plan, along with the rest of the city organization, the capital improvement program for Parks and Recreation never shrinks. I think the one we put together back in '22 was over $1.2 billion, hard to believe, but with 60% of the city's general fund facilities and many of them aging and the costs to renew them, it's not that surprising. But when we focus in and dial in on projects that we think are important, we do it based on what we anticipate will have the highest use and the greatest public benefit. The facility condition, safety primarily, accessibility is increasingly the focus of a number of the improvements we make. Often we have community demand and demonstrated community need, and then ultimately the goal in every project that we undertake is that there's a long-term benefit, so that when the project is complete, the city doesn't need to go back in the near term and redo anything. It's done and it's ready to go for 20 or 30 more years. Capital projects proposed for next year include funds to initiate the process to renovate Plaza Veracruz. We always need additional funds for park infrastructure. We have very little in our operating budget to repair gates, fences, picnic tables, grade areas. Playground replacement, we've done a great job with our playground replacement program over the years. For the next couple of years, we want to go in and increase accessibility in existing playgrounds, really try to find ways to enhance what we're doing in a number of playgrounds in small ways rather than a whole-scale replacement. So we would be able to touch 5 to 6 different playgrounds with these funds. The Dwight Murphy Field renovation project funds would continue to support the development of construction documents and move that project forward. That is a great example of a partnership with a private sector foundation, the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation, and we're moving forward with them, and they continue to support the project financially as well as a 50% partner. And then under Urban Forest Management Plan implementation, the Measure C funds for the last number of years have been used for both tree planting, but then also really addressing some significant deferred maintenance, working hand in hand with the Public Works street staff to define where that work really needs to happen to support both the street infrastructure improvements, but also address the street trees. Similarly, the Ortega Park Revitalization Project, with these funds, we would be shovel-ready by spring 2023. And then we have smaller projects like the restroom renovation for La Mesa Park, which is a little overdue, but will bring much-needed improvements there. The Franceschi Park renovation, these are funds that were actually cut from the budget at the beginning of the pandemic, so they're being restored. We have some funds carried over that we've held back. We initiated a request for proposal process and for design work in the middle of the pandemic, unfortunately not being able to advance that. With these additional funds, we would restart that in the fall of this year. And then the Creo Gym renovation is ready to go forward. We have our building permit, and Louise Lowry Davis interior renovation is ready to go forward. We have our building permits, and we would complete those improvements. And then lastly, other projects that are underway that we want to continue and complete in fiscal year 23, as I mentioned, East Side Neighborhood Park, Plaza Del Mar Band Shell. We're also working on 2 other projects. The Chase Palm Park Wisteria Arbor is a carryover from Chase Palm Park and work with the Waterfront Hotel. So we're in design right now for that project. And then also we're working with the Coastal Conservancy and members of the Chumash community to come up with a conceptual plan for Ambassador Park. And that is entirely grant funded to date. And with that, I would turn the rest of the presentation for the Creeks Fund over to Cameron Benson.
Mr. Benson. Thank you, Mayor Rouse and council members. Good to see you this afternoon. My name is Cameron Benson. I'm the Creeks Division Manager, and I'm going to be presenting the proposed FY23 Creeks Fund budget. Next slide, please. As you know, almost all of the funding for the Creeks Division comes from the voter-approved Measure B, which is a 2% TOT. that is placed into a special fund and restricted for uses including improving stormwater quality, surface water quality, and creek restoration projects. The Creeks Division receives no funding from the general fund, and the proposed budget is consistent with Measure B and with the Creeks Fund funding guidelines. Some program highlights for the Creeks Division include some key projects and program milestones. In our water quality improvement program, we have completed our design review and permitting of a water quality improvement and wetland restoration project at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. That's not an insignificant accomplishment. We had to go through 7 different permitting agencies because of the ecological and historic significance of that location. But we have all the permits in hand, and we're looking forward to constructing that project this fall. So we'll be under construction over there in September and October this year. We'll be back to you probably in a month or so with construction bids. We also are implementing a comprehensive creek and ocean water quality monitoring program, including weekly sampling, storm sampling. We do before and after project evaluations to see where we're getting the biggest bang for our buck in terms of water quality when we do capital projects. And we have an ongoing water quality research program and partnership with UCSB that's coming up on close to 20 years now, and we're continuing with that relationship. We also completed an urban runoff and stormwater treatment project at Bonnet Park this year. And I did want to mention the Creeks Division has a very significant trash cleanup program. We have contractors out 5 days a week in the creeks and along the waterfront. We end up, sadly, picking up about 55 tons of trash every year out of the creeks and along the beaches. In our creek restoration program area, the Creeks Division has completed construction of the Arroyo Burro Open Space Restoration Project. Most of you were out there when we had our ribbon cutting. Seeing a lot of people out there utilizing it, and the plants are all growing in nicely. We initiated a feasibility analysis and conceptual design for a creek restoration water quality improvement project on Mission Creek in Oak Park. That will be moving into final design in the next fiscal year. And then we're also collaborating with the Public Works Department on a creek restoration project on Lower Mission Creek. We expect to complete the preliminary design work for that project in FY23. And in our outreach and education program area, the Creeks Division has coordinated with other cities, UCSB, Santa Barbara County, Explore Ecology, and numerous other nonprofits to host a successful 22nd annual Creek Week event. And that's a community celebration that we've been doing for many years now to celebrate our creeks and watersheds and ocean and to build awareness and stewardship of our natural resources. We will be coordinating the event again this year. It's going to be in September, and it will start September 17th and kick off with Coastal Cleanup Day. We've also provided youth watershed education, even through the pandemic, where we work closely with Explore Ecology. They adapted very quickly. Our target is to reach 3,000 students per year. Even through the pandemic, we were hitting 2,500, 2,600 last year, and we're looking to be on track to be over 3,000 students this year. And we'll probably be able to continue to grow that in the future. And we're also conducting an extensive water quality outreach and education campaign, running public service announcements in English and Spanish on television, radio, and digital web-based media, as well as placing print advertisements in local newspapers, magazines, and in the exteriors and interiors of MTD buses. And so moving into the numbers, these are our revenue forecasts for FY23. As you can see, our FY23 projections have moved up significantly from where we are at the beginning of FY22. The lodging industry has come back very strongly. And even though you see that really large jump from the FY22 adopted to our FY23 recommended, it's really just getting us back in line with pre-pandemic times and what the TOT looked like then. I want to just note that our revenue projections don't include any grant funding, and so all of the grants Creeks Division applies for are always competitive grants, so we don't include that until we actually have the money, so it's just too speculative to include in a revenue projection. Next slide, please. And on the expenditure side, the proposed FY23 budget is substantially similar to the FY22 budget with some relatively small increases in the salary and benefits line item and in the supplies and services line item. Next slide, please. And the most notable change from FY22 to the current year is the increase in the transfer to our capital program. Here it's showing the increase from the original plan as $175,000, which is the largest increase in a line item that we have this year. But you can see what a jump it is from our FY22 adopted budget. We're jumping up $625,000 to move to $1,650,000 moving into our capital program. And that's just starting to get us back towards what our normal pre-pandemic was, and actually going forward into the future years, that number is going to keep climbing up. So we're moving back to normal in that regard. Our overall expenditures do slightly exceed the projected revenue. It's almost perfectly balanced, but there's $12,000 in expenditures, so we would be transferring $12,000 from the reserve to balance the budget. And then this chart shows our expenses by program area. So our three main program areas are water quality improvement, creek restoration, and outreach and education. And the recommendation from our Creeks Advisory Committee for a long time, their standing recommendation has been to utilize approximately half of our budget towards water quality improvement, a quarter of it towards creek restoration, and a quarter towards outreach and education. And that's about what we have here, 50%, 24%, 26%. I just want to note that this is our operating budget. It does not include capital, because when you do include the capital, it really shifts the numbers around. Obviously, with the community outreach, we don't have capital improvement projects, so that percentage would go way down if we included capital in that. This table lists the Creeks Division's capital improvement project funding that's planned for FY23. These are all included in the Creeks Division and the city's 5-year capital improvement program. Funding source is Measure B, and wherever we can get it, we will leverage that with grant funding. Next slide, please. Several of these projects will meet major milestones in the next fiscal year. Several that I've mentioned include the Lower Mission Creek restoration, the Mission Creek at Oak Park restoration project, and the Andre Clark Bird Refuge, which is a project that's really been a long time coming, and we're really excited about getting that one implemented. This chart shows the funding source for the Creeks Division capital program over the last several years. And as you can see, the darker color is a Measure B contribution. The lighter color is grant funding that we've been able to get for our capital program. So you can see those numbers vary significantly from year to year. And that depends a lot on what projects we have, what grants are available, where we are in the development phase of the project. And then, like I said, we have to compete for those funds. And over the years, we've been very, very successful with securing grants in the last 20 years. We've secured over $20 million in grant funds and been able to leverage the Measure B dollars, and we will continue to do so. The fact that those light-colored bars are smaller in recent years is not a reflection of a lack of trying. It's just having the right project at the right time and being able to compete for scarce dollars. So we're still plugging away and working hard to leverage those funds. And then the Creeks Fund reserve, the main purpose of the unappropriated reserves is to use for capital projects, grant matches, and revenue shortfalls. And the Creeks Advisory Committee recommendation is to maintain a $3 million reserve. As you can see, our reserves sometimes dip down below that, and right now are above that. And the main reasons that we're above that now are we readjusted our capital program and our budget to deal with the reduced revenues coming in. So now those reduced revenues have come back up. The millions of dollars that we suppressed in our capital fund over the last few years it's all coming back. So now we're looking really healthy with our reserve, and we also have had some cost savings that we've been able to roll into the reserve. The small proposed use of reserves in the next year's budget, $12,000, isn't going to put a dent in that. So on paper, our reserves should be maintained about $4.4 million at the end of FY23. But I do want to point out that it's possible that we could be coming to you for some of the reserve funding for different things over the next fiscal year. One is the prices are changing dramatically on bids for construction and materials, so the costs are, when it's changing dramatically, they're going up. And so we've got a really broad range on the bird refuge project in the engineer's estimate, for example, from $2 million to $2.9 million. And we've pegged what we've set aside at about 2.4. So we're right kind of in the middle of that, but if the bids end up coming in at the higher end of that range, then we're going to need to transfer some more money. And we have two projects that we're working on right now that have potential real estate acquisitions as part of them, as we've done in the past. So those, we may need to draw from our reserves to cover the cost of those as well. And obviously, we would be coming back to council with those if they were to proceed. So, and then lastly, we do have projected in the 5-year capital program increased capital transfer costs. So that line will probably keep shifting as we see it has over the last several years. And with that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Mayor Rouse and council members, I'm Tina Nelson, the business manager for Parks and Recreation. I'll be presenting to you the Golf Fund budget for proposed budget for fiscal year 23. The Golf Fund is an enterprise fund. We are dedicated to providing our residents and visitors of Santa Barbara with an exceptional and affordable experience on the golf course. We strive to have an inclusive environment that is excellent for socializing and to enjoy nature. Our golf program highlights for this past year and going into next year, we have recently renovated 13 greenside bunkers with excellent feedback from participants at the golf course. They're really enjoying that project that just completed in the last month. Our 2-year average customer service ratings for fiscal year 21 and 22 are at 98.5%. We are currently on target to exceed our budget of 60,000 paid rounds this year, and we are currently meeting and exceeding our IPM requirements while maintaining excellent course conditions. Our priorities for next year would be to continue to grow greens and cart fee revenues, to manage our potable water consumption, reinvesting in golf course infrastructure, continuing to look at ways we can increase non-financial measures of success in the golf course, maintaining our high customer service scores, and growing our number of preferred card holders. Our golf fund recommended budget for revenues is just under $4 million at 3.8, largely coming from golf fees and charges. We haven't projected any increases in concessions. It's difficult to say if that will continue to grow, so I'm comfortable with the number that was originally planned in fiscal year '22. However, we are projecting a $400,000 increase overall from fiscal year '22 to fiscal year '23. As part of this increase in revenue would be slight increases in our fees, similarly to our recreation and general fund programs. Items that we take into consideration when increasing fees was how do we maximize participation while still having some cost recovery in our program. We research our target markets and competition to make sure that the proposed fees are still providing the best value in our area, in addition to, again, that cost recovery and capital needs infrastructure. Our recommended fee changes are some examples. We have a slight increase from $1 to $3 in green fees, specifically a $1 increase from $29 to $30 per round for 9 holes. This would be a weekday resident rate. For 18 holes, weekday resident, we're proposing a $3 increase from $42 to $45 per round. $1 increase from $15 to $16 per round, and this would be for ages 7 to 17, 7 days a week. And a $1 increase from $17 to $18 per rider, 7 days a week. Our golf fund expenditures are $3.2 million, with the lion's share of that expense residing with our supplies and services. This is where the Courseco management fees reside, and these are monies that we pay out as reimbursement to them for managing the golf course. And here specifically, you can see that 40% of our golf course budget resides with golf course maintenance, with management and incentive fees, operations, city oversight, general administration, and other fees. Our golf course capital program, we have, for the city, proposed a $228,000 capital program. With Courseco, our vendor has made a 2-year commitment. Next year would be the second year of contributing $125,000 to capital improvements. So their commitment for fiscal year '23 is $62,500 for a combined total of $290,000. We would be looking at golf course infrastructure renewals as well as course improvements. Our golf course reserve, going into fiscal year '20, you can see that pre-pandemic, we were below the required threshold for the golf course reserves. However, with the pandemic and golf being a safe space outdoors to enjoy, we have been able to restore the reserve requirement and actually exceed that we are at $1.5 million over reserve target and projecting to be closer to $2.5 million by the end of fiscal year '23.
Mayor Rouse and council members, just a few more slides. The department reviewed its proposed budget with the Parks and Recreation Commission, Golf Advisory Committee, and Creeks Advisory Committee. The Golf Advisory Committee reviewed the proposed budget on April 23rd. Creeks Advisory Committee reviewed the proposed Creeks Fund budget on April 20th. Both of them recommended to the Parks and Recreation Commission approving the budget as proposed. And then the Parks and Recreation Commission conducted a hearing on April 27th, and they also recommended council accept the budget as proposed. Some of their comments that they asked staff to share via slide with you is their support for programs aimed at youth, particularly those benefiting children without access to other programming, programs for the vulnerable adult and senior population, funding to support the ability to maintain our parks, with acknowledging the increasing cost of staff, water, and other material costs. And then to really express their commitment to maintaining open spaces. The pandemic has only further reminded us and revitalized the importance of open space for the health and vitality of our community. And with that, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. We have questions from council. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions. I'll start with creeks. I just had a question on the slide where you showed the reserves, and it was recommended that it's at 3 million, and it hasn't increased. So what's the thought behind not increasing that a little bit each year to try to address some of the issues that might come up with increased inflation and everything? And is there a plan to increase that?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman. We had a discussion at the Creeks Advisory Committee meeting about that, and I think the conclusion of the discussion was that relative to the Creeks Division budget, annual budget, $3 million is a pretty healthy reserve, and we weren't in a place where we really needed to increase that relative to the budget.
Just wondering, that's helpful, just wanted to understand, because most of them, they do increase over time, but that's perfectly understandable. I'm glad you looked at it. So, on the, let's see here. I have a question in regards to, it was referenced, when, it's not for creeks, it's for general park maintenance. When the streets division does projects, and then we have like medians and things, and the Parks Division maintains those. Is that my understanding correct on that?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, it depends on the location and when the project occurred. So we, over the years, as city street infrastructure has evolved, depending on the type of project, whether it's city initiated or Caltrans, for example, initiated, like the roundabout at Old Coast Highway. Some are the roundabout at Las Positas and Cliff Drive. Those projects go before the Architectural Board of Review, and therefore often are required to have some level of landscape. The division of responsibility between Public Works and Parks and Recreation got refined a number of years ago, where any new landscape, as well as some of the landscapes maintained by the Public Works Department, got transferred over for maintenance by the Parks Division. And so there isn't necessarily every median or parkway that requires a certain amount. It's mostly new and ones that were already in our system as being ones that the city maintained.
So the new ones are maintained by Parks, or the new ones are maintained by Streets Division?
They are maintained by the Parks Division, and one of the challenges / opportunities we have when that happens is figuring out how to fund the maintenance of those new landscapes.
And do you have an estimate? If you don't, it's of what that costs per year for the maintenance of these? And it comes out of is it usually come out of the general fund?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, I know our city administrator is also intimately familiar with this. When you go to the actual budget for the Parks Division, and I'll get to that slide, and let's see, slide 23. The easiest way is for me to reference this slide. The medians and parkways budget that you see there is actually $517,000, because $90,000 in that expense budget is for the Sheffield open space. So if we pull that out, because that's waterfront, that is what we spend on the medians and parkways that we have in the city. Of that amount, a portion of it is funded by utility users tax, and the balance is funded by the general fund. It basically works out to a 40-60 split. So 40% of medians and parkways is covered through utility users tax, and the 60% of medians and parkways is covered by the general fund.
And Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, if I can, the utility users tax is managed in two pieces. I think it's important. The council has had a long-standing policy of giving 50% of that money to your streets functions so that it can be used for the maintenance of streets. A portion of that money that moves to the streets function, a portion of that 50% then goes on to the medians and parkways. So it is, and the rationale being that the adjacency of the median and parkway to the roadway effectively makes it a part of the roadway infrastructure. So the funding comes out of the UUT that is designated for streets, if that helps clarify. And the rationale for moving it to parks is that there were two teams basically working on medians and parkways, and it was sometimes unclear who was doing what, and there was much more efficiency to be able to have one team doing planned maintenance and management of those.
Thank you. That's helpful as I'm thinking of long-term questions for the Parks Department. But just a couple more questions. On Ortega Park, just wanted to understand that the $500,000 is to take it to final design and permitting. Is that correct? To make it shovel-ready?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, that's correct. And it's anticipated that we would complete this work. This work would be complete by spring 2023, calendar year 2023.
And then the next steps after that would be to search grants and fundraise to go to construction?
That's correct.
Okay. And then just a more general question, which will help me frame my comments at the end, but I think the medians and parkways is a perfect example. Have you begun a process, or are you in phase of a planning process to analyze your programs and services to see where there's volatility in them and what we can do to make those more stable, such as different fees or different types of revenue sources? The concern is that with our city being so reliant on TOT and sales tax, as we've seen, that a lot of the times the Parks Department programs, which we rely upon so heavily in the community, don't have that support they need because they're so reliant on that. So is there a process? I know there's the general process the Finance Department's looking at, but have you started that, or are you going to be, is that going to be part of this deep dive that the Finance Committee and the Finance Department is doing?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, I think it's both. We do that every year. So the Parks Division does not have the ability to generate revenue. The Recreation Division has the ability to generate revenue. We're at about 60% cost recovery for all of our recreation programs and services. We're constantly looking for ways to generate the revenue. We have our recreation program budget, which is just over $10 million proposed for '23. 4 of that $10 million is general fund subsidy. The other $6 million is revenue. And so if the revenue doesn't come in, the expense also doesn't happen. So they go hand in hand. With the Parks Division looking at this expense, this program budget, the revenue that we do bring in, or the non-general fund sources of revenue, as we just discussed, come from the utility. I mean, it's general fund, but it's dedicated for streets. It's for utility users tax for forestry. So work that we're doing within the street right-of-way, as well as work that we're doing on behalf of other departments, such as maintaining the open space or maintaining landscapes in the waterfront department.
Okay. And my last question is, because it came up at the library, and I know it's a small thing, but it's a good PR. Is there any parks merchandise that we currently have or that we could plan to have?
Councilmember Rouse, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman. I don't know that we've thought about selling our stuff before. Generally, when we have a summer camp, kids do get a T-shirt, so they're paying for it, indirectly in their fees. I would add that through our junior lifeguard program, the junior lifeguard participants do get stuff, but frankly, it comes from their parents contributing outside of their summer fees for that. So we haven't found a way to actually market merchandise.
I know it's a tough task because you got to figure out what it is and then how to market it, but it is something I think long-term, it would be great to, if you live in a neighborhood, it'd be great to have say, we're talking about Ortega Park, an Ortega Park hat or Ortega Park shirt, just that you could buy at any time to wear around the neighborhood or something like that. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have questions about the golf course. Do you know how many public golf courses are left in the state?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez, and I do not know that off the top of my head, but I can find that out and be prepared to speak to it at a future time.
Yeah, if you can just send me an email.
Sure.
I'm just curious. would you happen to know how our prices for our municipal golf course compared to the others?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez, I have done local market research to see how we compare, but I can also do a competitive analysis of how we fare with similar municipalities.
Okay.
I can speak to the local rates in that we are the best value in town. When we prepared for this budget process, I compared us to Sandpiper and Glen Annie Golf Course. We looked at the Ventura Golf Course. And as you look at our rates are lower or within a few dollars of each. The Ventura Golf Course only gives a Ventura County resident discount, where our resident discount applies to the Tri-County area. We are definitely lower than Glen Annie, of course, and Sandpiper, sorry, off the top of my head. So I can say with 100% confidence that that we are the best price for what we have here locally.
Yeah, I can imagine. Being a member of a private golf course, I hear, is pretty expensive. Do you know how many golfers from out of town or out of state come and play at our course?
That's a great, Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez, that's a great question. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but what I can do is look at the fees and charges. We look at those in terms of paid rounds versus non-paid rounds or tournaments. But I can look at our GL lines that we receive from the golf course to see if that non-resident rate is singled out to see where people are coming from.
Thank you. And so did you earlier mention that Ventura County gives a discount to residents, but we do not?
We, Councilmember Gutierrez, Mayor Rouse, we do give a tri-county resident rate. Ventura County only gives a resident discount to Ventura County residents.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you know how much of a difference we would make if we kept it to only city locals?
Councilmember Gutierrez, Mayor Rouse, sorry, new. I don't know what that difference would make. I think that it's a fine line between costing our rates to bring in as many people as possible while still doing cost recovery with the price of gas and other things that impact people's willingness to travel outside their footprint. I think that number is something that probably varies based on what's going on in the economy. But our rates are based on how do we attract the largest volume of play while still providing a great value. So while I don't have the specific dollars and cents to answer that question, I would say that our rates are designed to attract as many players as possible within the Tri-County area.
Okay. And so I've heard from some people that the golf course is losing money, but judging from the numbers that you presented, that's not true then.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez, that is not true. The golf course is actually making money, and which would be evidenced in how we are putting money into the golf course reserve fund. I pulled this past month, we have a monthly rounds and revenue report, and through April of 2022, budgeted revenue for the golf course was $246,000. In April, the golf course made $375,691 in revenue. Year to date, our budgeted numbers for the golf course would be $2.5 million, and we are currently at $3.171 million. And we are just now ahead of the prior year's performance by $41,000. So we are seeing an increase in golf course use, and the golf course is making money.
That's great. And does the golf course hold any tournaments?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Fun. All right. Well, thank you. That's all my questions.
Mayor Rouse, if I could just add very quickly, I think this slide gives a sense of where we were in 2018, which was probably year 2 or year 3 of our agreement with Courseco. Council approved a renewal back in 2021, 1 for another 5 years. We are in a much more favorable place golf course than we have been in a very long time. And what it will enable us to do is reinvest in some fairly failing infrastructure that we have. And it's partly due to the pandemic, people playing golf and not being able to travel, but I would also add that the quality of play has improved tremendously at the golf course in the last number of years, too.
Hey, Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you. It's always a great presentation to be reminded of all the things that parks do, and creeks and the golf course also. I'll have praise and comments later, but just a couple questions first. Yeah, we're behind Ms. Bjork's screen here, so we'll go like, there. That's great. Thank you. So just some quick questions on the capital projects. If you could just let me know for both Franceschi Park renovation and the Park Infrastructure Safety Program, those two come out of general fund, but the others come out of Measure C. Is there, what is the sort of reason for why some would come out of some and others?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, Parks and Recreation participates with all of the departments looking at capital needs throughout the city every year, sources of funds for capital projects, and the allocation of sort of the small amount of general fund that's available every year, where that most closely aligns. Often parks and library and other small projects get general fund monies, and those are can be a lot smaller but still have great effect. In this case, the general fund allocation for Franceschi Park had been a general fund allocation prior to the pandemic and was cut from the budget because we had grave concerns regarding the city's financial stability. And so it's really putting that back in from where it was taken out.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that, but I do wonder if it might be better coming out of Measure C.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, it is effectively the same thing. You have an allocated portion of your budget that you've designated as capital improvement money. And so we take that function and fund it. We've made some long-standing commitments to that I think this council and your predecessors should be very proud of, including even in very bad situations, pre-Measure C, continuing to fund your ADA programs through that. So there is a continuing allocation. Of course, we have a resolution from council that sets priorities for Measure C, with the highest priorities being to the streets and the police station projects. As we told you when we were coming through to get support for Measure C, we knew that this was going to be wonderful, and it has been. It's been amazing. But we also knew it wasn't going to be enough to offset the full amount of deferred capital that we had. So we're continuing to chip away at it. We continue to use both the general fund, the historical general fund pot, and the Measure C general fund pot to chip away at the highest priorities.
Thank you. And then I know there's been a lot of work at Franceschi Park, actually. Thank you for clearing and brush clearing. And was that part of the original budget, or did you have to use other funds for that, or are there continued funds for that type of work?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, that was a reordering of our staff resources from other parks to Franceschi Park. So that's one of the challenges that we face, and that we don't have all of the resources that we need to maintain all of our parks at a level that often people would like them to be maintained.
Thank you, and thank you for what's been done there. I think the residents in that area are really grateful and have commented on it quite a bit, how much better that is. And then for medians and parkways, is there any difference, or could there be a case made for there to be a difference? I'm not sure exactly, in high fire hazard areas, so, where they're hazardous at all, or it's a different level of maintenance for medians and parkways in more visible areas of the city?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, I actually would defer to Simone Herrera to speak to, the few medians that we have essentially, so APS and in that area that we maintain, the frequency with which we do that and the rationale for that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sven, while Mr. Herrera is coming up, I do want to say that in addition to the medians and parkways, we also have a lot of public space that is owned by the city that maintains fire hazard clearance in accordance with high fire guidance beyond what we spend on medians and parkways. So that is outside this program, and we do that project as well.
Thank you. And those are prioritized by the CWPP, yes, in the vegetation management units?
It's through the vegetation management, and so, for example, a good example is all of the adjacent property. It's not considered either a median or parkway, but along Las Positas, we're high opportunity for grass and that kind of thing. That's all cleared on a regular basis, as is open space at a number of our other facilities. But I'll turn it to Mr. Herrera to talk to your specific question.
And what I'm getting at just is that maybe that parks could get a bump in funds to address high fire area medians and parkways is sort of my reason for asking.
Mayor Rouse and council members. So we maintain a total of 46 medians and parkways. 13 of those originally have been maintained for years by the Parks and Recreation Department. 23 of them were added 2 years ago. And it's basically what it is vegetation and brush removal that we do, and that's only once a year, right before, as long as we do it before June 15th, we're in compliance. So we're doing that as we speak, and we'll probably be done with that within about 3 weeks.
Thank you so much.
But that's only 26 sites.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for addressing that.
You're
And then we had, I brought the rose garden pruning back, thank you. And I know one of the issues with that before was having the staff level to be able to even coordinate volunteers. We had a lot of volunteers, but weren't able to bring them all together. And if you could just comment on staffing level and ability to sort of leverage that with volunteers. There's so many people who want to help with our parks.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, the AC Postel Rose Garden is near and dear to many people's hearts. It's also got, I think, 800 different roses in it, and it requires a level of management that we frankly aren't funded for. So the volunteer support that we get is very valuable. For many years, we had an hourly staff person who is dedicated to that. He's no longer able to work for us, and it's been hard to find someone to work in an hourly basis. Plus, we don't have much in the way of dedicated funding for that site. We have a small endowment, which is actually being terminated this year. The Wade Firth Endowment gave us $5,000 a year that we could use towards maintaining the Rose Garden, and this is the last year we'll receive those funds. So again, it sort of goes into the big pot that we have to figure out how to allocate those resources across many of our park areas.
Okay, and then currently is this, and thank you, and is it going to be funded past the endowment, or we're figuring out what the plan will be past that, or is it precarious?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, the hourly staff will continue that we have, and we actually have a new hourly person that we're grooming in that position. But all of the other additional work, the one-offs and the soil improvements and the irrigation, we would have to find a way to fund separately that we've been using the endowment to support to date.
And will that be in next year's budget then we would look at? You have enough for that for this year?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, yes, we have funds in our miscellaneous grants funds for this year, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And then the Carrillo Gym renovation, and is that whole project going to be done in this year, or the 2.4 plus million? What is it going toward?
All right, so Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, that project has a building permit ready to go. It's a project that's been underway for the last couple of years, working closely with the Facilities Division of Public Works. It essentially will stop the building from falling down, replace the roof, do much-needed basic building improvements so that we can retain the structure. Funds for that project, some of those funds were in this year's capital project program, but were deferred or set aside for Library Plaza, and so they're moving forward into next year. We will be ready to go out to bid, assuming it works with the schedule for bidding out a construction project and get it done next year.
Thank you. And then it may come in and bid higher than what's allotted because of the changes in the economy?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, it might. We always hold out hope that we will be on target, and sometimes we have been successful despite the increase in cost and construction for some of our projects.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Cameron, can I get you up again for one more? Could you just chat about whether or not you've seen an increased impact in the city watersheds due to homelessness?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, what we saw was during the pandemic, and when the pandemic first started, the CDC put out guidance not to interfere or move or mobilize homeless encampments for fear of spreading COVID throughout the community. So the city followed that guidance, and we saw really significant growth in homeless encampments in the creeks. Population probably got up to somewhere around 150 people living in city creeks during that time. And once that guidance went away, and we were actually in a situation where we were coming into our rainy season in Santa Barbara and concerned about public health and contamination of water, concerned about people's belongings being swept away, about people being swept away. So we were pretty aggressive at trying to get people out of the creeks, and that effort took a while, but was successful. I think we had about 6 to 10 weeks of really intensive effort to get that cleaned up and moved out, and we did. And then we just kept more pressure on that to prevent that from happening again. For a long time, recently, for several months, we were down to less than 10 people that we would find and moving around from location to location. So we got down to kind of pre-pandemic number. We're still doing the enforcement. We're still referring people to services. We're working with the various agencies the city has working on that. We are seeing a little uptick over the last, say, 3 weeks. I don't know if it's because of weather, because we're heading into summer months. I'm not sure why exactly that's happening, but we continue to work with all the agencies that the city has in place to.
So in your wildest imagination, is handling it at the point of impact a better plan, or chasing the point source with your resources? I mean, is it just looking like this is going to be a slog forever? Is it better to wait till they get in the creeks and use your resources there, or is it better to try and stop them from getting into the creeks with sharing your resources?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, what we've seen is that the individuals change for the most part over time. So we have those cleanup commitments no matter what.
Okay.
And we do have some individuals that stick around for a long time, but they tend to be assistance resistant.
Yep.
And we're working really hard with those individuals, with the police department, with help me out, SB Act, and one other that CityNet. Thank you, blanking out. And we're working with them, but have not had success with those particular.
If anybody
individuals.
had, we'd know about it and we'd be able to implement too. So thanks. Good to see you also.
Thanks.
All right, very good. Just a couple quick questions. Ms. Zachary, you mentioned the Children's Parade. Was that coming back this year for Fiesta? And what would be the route for that?
I'm sorry, Mayor Ross, what was the second half?
What's the route going to be for that parade?
The route is the same route as the parade route, but slightly shorter. I think
On,
no, it's along Cabrillo Boulevard.
It is along
I
Cabrillo.
think I'll ask Rich Hanna to answer that since he's
Oh.
overseeing that.
okay.
Mayor House and council members, we originally were planning on doing the Cabrillo Boulevard route, but in a shortened, condensed area. But it actually coincides and conflicts with the arts and craft holiday special shows, so we're actually planning on using a section of State Street between Mission and Sola Street.
All right, very good. Well, I was just kind of wondering if we could, what the adjustment was going to be. I know Old Spanish Days have been pretty nimble about their plans for this year. And then, very quickly on, you mentioned a capital program for Plaza Veracruz renovation. Is that going to, what is that, and what are the big plans going to include? Are we still going to have a vendor in there? And what are we doing as far as the, is it a preschool or daycare school, whatever that is right in that corner?
Mayor Rouse and council members, the funds that are proposed for next year will help us initiate a community design process for Plaza Veracruz. We currently have an agreement with the Trapeze, Santa Barbara Trapeze, which we would continue until there's a future plan, at least for the next 3 years. But that would continue while we're doing a planning process. I've been working with Communify over where to relocate the Head Start program. They're very much aware that the police station at some point will be under construction and they will need to relocate. So when we look at sort of the future of that park, the assumption is that would be relocated before any changes to the park are made.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll go to public comment. I have one speaker slip here for Kathy McGill. You have 3 minutes at the podium, please.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. Kathy McGill, the Chair of Parks and Recreation Commission. Not surprisingly, I'm here to support the department's budget proposal and really also support all the work Parks and Rec does to provide safe parks and open areas and enriching recreational programs, as well as maintaining the large urban forest and everything else you've seen. I'm encouraged to see recreational programming returning to full strength, and I truly hope that council ensures adequate funding for free and subsidized programming. While our focus tends to be on underserved youth, it's important that we not lose our commitment to vulnerable adults and seniors. And an example here for me would be ensuring completion of the Louise Lowry Davis Center. I personally am especially concerned about staffing and investment in our parks and open areas. We have rich and diverse parks and open areas. They provide a vital service to our entire community, as we've seen, and I think it's fair to say that in some places they are being loved to death. And while private fundraising, which we talk about a lot, plays an important role, it naturally tends to be focused on marquee projects like, for example, the band shell. I believe that it's important for the city to demonstrate its commitment to the community by providing funds to adequately maintain and consistently invest in our parks, and particularly our community parks, which tend to be chronically underinvested given the use that they get. And finally, and this goes back to when we reviewed, the Parks and Recreation Commission reviewed this budget, someone in a presentation referred to our parks staff as first responders, always there in an emergency, while also providing day-to-day care and maintenance to a vital city resource. Their work tends to be behind the scenes, early in the morning sometimes, and it's easy to overlook the importance of their role. And I would like, as you go forward and you make the decisions on budgets, for you to be bearing that in mind, I guess, as you make your decisions. And with that, I think you'll see that these comments kind of mirrored what Director Zachary had on our slides, so probably not a surprise. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service. I think Mr. Jordan had a question for, comment. Well, that's not time for that yet. I have a couple of,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have 2 speakers. We will hear from Mary Turley and BB Longstreet. Mary Turley, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can
You're-
you hear me?
Go ahead. We're going to turn up your volume.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Rouse and City Councils for your service, and to the Parks and Recreation staff for this budget review. The Parks and Recreation Department touches everybody in the community, and I appreciate all that you do. I'm a swimmer and a pickleball player and a walker. I'm here to comment on a very specific benefit which is provided to residents who choose to participate, and this is in our community gardens. As a home gardener, I've used community gardens in the past when I was a renter in an apartment, and I'd like to see more community gardens in Santa Barbara and to reach a wider group of residents who would benefit from these gardens. The move to reduce the amount of space in the garden plots as proposed on the East Side Neighborhood Park works against the existing gardeners and future gardeners as vegetables take up space. With significantly reduced garden parcel sizes, the only thing that can be grown is flowers and herbs, which doesn't help families. This is counter to the goal of encouraging community gardens. With our push for higher density housing and limited open space, we need to expand community gardens program and put money towards that end. Please outreach and collaborate with all existing community gardeners. They're a wealth of information. For their feedback on what's needed for these gardens, and including community outreach, support, and funding. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is BB Longstreet. BB Longstreet, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. As all of you know, I'm here to support Parks and Recreation. I'm very happy to see the return of our summer fun, youth apprentice programs, and the support we give to families who don't have access to other programming. It is especially important in these times. But I also have concerns about parks. Over my 25 years, I've watched the budget become more and more impacted. Water costs go up. We see an increase in salaries and chemical costs. And I think we're going to need to be more innovative over the next few years and also reinvest in our parks. Right now, I'm so proud of the parks teams that are renovating turf and doing that in-house, because our parks are the front yards for many of our children in our community and also adults. So I think as we look to the future, we really do need to reinvest in our parks and make sure we fund them adequately. When I started 25 years ago, we had a field study, and we had an inadequate amount of fields. We haven't added a field in 25 years. So we're still suffering the same problems, and we need to make the best use of our parks and make sure that our parks are the gems that they need to be. And that means supporting the staff that maintain them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there further speakers, Madam Clerk?
No further speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll go back to council for comments. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really could just repeat what Ms. Longstreet said. I couldn't agree more. It's kind of, you've had, particularly in Parks and Rec, I think, with 2 years of unprecedented stress due to COVID, kind of a accumulation of a place to stay for homeless. It's probably been unprecedented in the impacts on the departments, and it's really time to renew our commitment to resources to this department, reflecting that all of us have found some way to reconnect back into the facilities and outdoor spaces that these resources we have reflect. And so I fully support everything Ms. Longstreet said. Really, that last slide where you had the Parks and Recs Commission's emphatic points, all those emphatic points are really emphatic and really good. And then I guess I would add to that I would encourage you to push each of us to make sure we give you what you need to make those spaces clean and safe so that you can actually run your programs and services for the community. And then I just have a couple constructive comments. I'd give you the same encouragement I gave to Waterfront on your reserves graphs. That's either raise your reserves or get them into some type of appropriated fund that don't show the big amount of reserves sitting there. You know, every day somewhere, I'm sure each one of us have to justify those talking points on dollars in reserve accounts well over reserve targets, and why are they there? Inside baseball is we can all talk why they're there because we know where they're going to end up or where they're going to get moved to, but at the time they're there and they're double the amount of the reserves, it's just not a good talking point out in the community, whether it's employees who aren't getting paid, whether it's people who are paying rent on a piece of property the city lets them use, whatever it may be. I would just encourage you to not use graphics like that because it just makes the problem worse. And then on your priorities, I would encourage you also to get Elings Park in there somewhere as a priority to play an active role in getting them back into fold with the city and their master plan and their place in that corridor. Their seemingly disconnect, let's call it, from my perspective, is not anybody's fault that I want to say. Could be their fault, could be our fault, could be both of our faults. But I think it's only without saying that that's a priority, I only see that circumstance getting worse with the additional people and resources being placed in that corridor with the just completed multi-mode path, the connection with the bridge down to Hendry's, that I just think we need to recognize that they're on the other side of that road and put them in a priority to get them in the process with us, get them in a process with themselves. And then generally, whatever it looks like on the outside, I think we need to improve on our engagement. And I'll just use constructively the Ortega Park process and the Yananoli Gardens process. Okay, again, I get to look at those from inside baseball, and I could probably, without even knowing what we did, recite what we did, and nobody showed up, and then we ended up down the road. But the burden is on us to make sure that we don't repeat those type of occurrences, and that we walk through those processes and end up better at the end of them because of the method we choose to engage, rather than engage the same way and end up not in a good place. So I just say, I don't know what that looks like. It's not my job. I'm just going to tell you that's my constructive input on that both of those in particular seem to run the same track of people unhappy when we were ready to go or at a significant point to make a decision. And I don't think you want me going to meetings and then telling you how to run Parks and Rec. I don't think that's what you want. I think you guys want to run Parks and Rec. And so I just think we need to take those as a learning moment and figure out a way to do the engagement better so that it meets the end result we want to see. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Friedman?
Thank you. First, I just want to thank you for the presentation, Ms. Zachary, and your team. Over the years, worked with many of you for many years, and some of you over the last few years have gotten to know you. I think you do an outstanding job. All of our Parks Department staff from the hourlies, everyone up, does a great job, and I think our community appreciates all the programming in particular that is available, as well as the outdoor facilities. And coming out of the pandemic, there is a shift, and I think it's put a heightened sense of value on outdoor open space. And so I agree with Councilmember Jordan and Ms. Longstreet that we really need to look at what is the proper level of investment or the needed level of investment, where are we falling short, and what are our options. There are some efficiencies we can always do, but that can only get you so far. We need to look at just systemically how we can get to where we need to be and where the community expects us to be. So I would like to add Parks Department to, I see Mr. DeMartini out there, to the recommended deeper dives that the Finance Committee is going to do, because I think it'd be valuable for us to understand your department, the ins and outs. I learned a lot today just from the conversation on how the medians are funded, those types of things. So just come back and have a special meeting at some point through that process on parks, similar to the library, where we have a 2-hour block or whatever it is, where we can really get in there and understand what are the expenditures, the finances, what are options for looking at new revenue sources, those types of things, and to get us to where we need to be. And I think it will be very valuable in terms of the larger discussions that were taking place at the city. And I am also interested in our expanded partnerships with the school district. I know that we are working with them, and there's tremendous opportunities there. And it was mentioned, I think, Ms. McGill, not just our youth, but also our seniors. And opportunities for our youth and our seniors to engage with each other, I think, are very important opportunities as well. And so I think you're always doing great. Our parks are such a needed part, and I look forward to getting more information and seeing what we can do long-term, especially as we prep for the 2-year budget a year from now, to try to get us going in the direction where we need to go. So thank you again, Ms. Zachary, to you and all your staff for the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. So just comments, our parks are really prized, and I think we've all echoing that. I think we realize how essential they are and have always been, but I think new appreciation for those open spaces and being able to use them. I just want to note a few things that particular praise for the work in Franceschi Park that was really responsive and with the community there and clearing that. And just to put forward the comment that there are pathways through there that are need to be stabilized, I suppose. And I know you know that's true, and maybe if that's part of the capital, there's maybe looking at that newly, maybe at the Parks Department, the commission level of looking at the priorities of that project, maybe the pathways being made safe first, and then the building. We might just want to relook at sort of the order of operations of that improvement. The Bonnet Park was such a huge success, not just for parks, but for creeks also, and so much of the beauty of what's going on there is not even seen, and that was such an incredible project and a big success. I really want to thank you for having the pruning at the Rose Garden. My family pruned a whole square, and we love to see it, how it comes back over the year. And there were, as you said, a lot of people in the community who were concerned about if it went too far without them being cared for, that we wouldn't be able to go back. So whatever we can do to help leverage all those volunteers who do really want to help and be a part of, and I know it takes time to make that time, but maybe that could, over the long term, be a self-sustaining operation to keep that going. I really want to thank you for the pivot you made on Ortega Park and the Yananali Gardens, both of those in response to big public outcry and difficult times for public outreach during pandemic and not our usual way of hearing input. And you really responded to that. And I think that was difficult. And I really want to congratulate you on that, and not just pivoting, but also reopening the whole discussions and being in partnership with the community. And I commend you for that. The Cabrillo Pavilion, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. I love the restaurant. I was very skeptical about the restaurant replacement, as you know, and it's one of my favorite places, and if people haven't been, they absolutely should go. And then the programming in the recreation space itself, the health benefit of that Cabrillo Pavilion now being open, and then the very respectful to the historic resources and really re-celebrating those made that whole project such a success. And so, it seems like so long ago now that was reopened, but what a long project that was, and so beautiful and well appreciated. What you've done for the youth and in our community during COVID, it's been a mental health crisis for our youth, and keeping programs going, outdoor programs going, open space programs has really been a gift to our community. So I do support the continuation of grants and funding and whatever we can do, particularly for lower income families who might not have open space, right in their backyards. And that's just a resource, as you know, for the whole community. I support the position changes that you put forward. I support the recommended fee changes. They're so small, really, and we might even want to look at some of those increases in fees could be a little bit more, I think. I also, this is something that didn't come up here. You mentioned very quickly Ambassador Park. I do want to share that I had a member of the Chumash community share with me how this particular project and the outreach is such an example of how it should be done, to be talking to all the different bands, all the different voices, and so incredibly open to all the voices. And I was really proud of the work that you're doing there to have that genuine conversation, not after the fact, but during the whole building of it. And I just wanted to share that praise with you. For Creeks, I'm the liaison to the Creeks committee, so there's so many projects that we don't hear so much about, so it was nice today to get a sprinkling, but so many this year, huge impacts, the Bonet Park projects, the Arroyo Burrow restoration, all the way from the headwaters on down, and having that all completed through there. And the work that you're doing with monitoring the biome and that presentation that was at the last Creeks Committee, really interesting and innovative. And it's if you don't follow the Creeks Committee, they do such interesting work that's specially funded by Measure B and really appreciated. And then also I want to share that the committee itself always gives particular praise for how you manage the budget and leveraging funds and grant funds, and they're always so appreciative. Just to share that. The Golf Fund, it's so great to see those revenues those coming up and the rebound of the reserves. Also in the pandemic, a safe space to recreate and socialize. I know a lot of people who took advantage of that and really appreciated it. And even if you're not a golfer, it just is a reserved open space that I appreciate as well. And I do, in general, want to say I support the deep dive that Councilmember Friedman mentioned. Our park maintenance needs to be supported. We just have to make sure the budget is there for that. And then this sort of new awareness of community gardens, even though you've been supporting them all this time, I think now there's a larger community interest in like, oh, well, hey, I want a community garden too. And so I know this is sort of longer range, but I've heard requests from people on the Mesa, like we should have a community garden. I know at Ealings Park, they want to do a community garden. Maybe there's something in that, or just community gardens in general as we're sort of lessening our turf spaces and our grass spaces. And I know it's a very big topic, and I'm just sprinkling it in there now as let's keep it in mind that I think as we move forward, community gardens are going to be more and more appreciated, and being looking for opportunities of where those might go. And that's all I have. Just thank you so much. And the work on Francesca, I'm sure will be in communication about how that goes. But I think a relooking at that priority in the order would be helpful.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to echo my colleagues and say thank you for all the hard work that you've all been doing during this trying time, and appreciate the work you did on Bonet Park and the Summer Nights program that we're working on. And yeah, just keep up the good work and let us know how we can help out. Thanks.
All right, very good. Well, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Benson for getting over a century's worth of hurdles and issues and finally getting the bird refuge, because it's a bigger deal than a lot of people think it is in terms of the first and last impression you may have of our city. So I'm very pleased that that's going forward. I was with Ms. Zachary at the Gwendolyn Strong event, and that is going to be a fabulous partnership. It's a big undertaking, but a great thing to do with that park that's so severely in need of some TLC and some major renovation. And just the whole project is great. And I will say that we don't get to hear it very much, but they're very impressed on how well the city is cooperating with them in their project. So just thought I had to shout that one out. And then we have the 1,000 Steps project on the Mesa, and which is an amazing undertaking. I look at it every morning when I'm doing my beach thing, and it really is evident how important that access is, because it's a long way between other beach accesses for the public. So, and you can see how much the public's missing it right now. So, looking forward to that, and that's going to be quite a thing when that's finished up. And with that, unless anybody else has something to say, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.